Now we are going to talk about possible program types that you may see as an RBT. Programs are what you'll be working on with the patient. There are several types of assessments within applied behavior analysis. Primarily in ABA, we can break this down into three general areas. Indirect assessments. This involves parent interviews, surveys. The patient does not need to be present. It is indirect. Direct assessment means that we're actually going to observe the patient. Here we might take ABC data, complete items from assessments, and design the behavior plan. There's also a third type, which is an experimental analysis. We're not going to go too far into that, but the point is an experimental analysis, what you're doing is actually manipulating the environment to see if we can find like the function of behavior and why a person may engage in certain things. So, there's indirect assessments, which the patient doesn't have to be present at. Direct assessments, where we actually observe the patient, and experimental analysis. From these assessments, goals are written. These goals address the skills and deficits of the patient. They take into account the development age of the child, so we have to make age-appropriate goals. Within these goals, there are target items that help the patient reach the goal or build up toward the goal. So the goal is a desired result, such as the patient will identify 25 new target objects. Target items would be each of those labels, so like identification of each target item. So the overall goal would be the patient will identify 25 new objects, while each target would be each one of those 25 items. And remember, when describing behavior, we quantify it. We also do this when describing target items. We would not just say, well, choose color blue. After all, if I say that, what do you mean? Like, does he have to only choose it one time? What if we ask him 100 times and he only chooses it one time? Would it be mastered then? So, we put mastery criteria, such as we'll choose blue in 4 out of 5 trials. And when I'm, as a behavior analyst, when I'm running goals, sometimes I'll add time to that. Like, we'll choose the color blue in 4 out of 5 trials and at least 3 opportunities. So, the person has to do that at least 3 times. The point, though, is the RBT, I want you to understand that we have to quantify this stuff. So you'll be looking at that depending on the program, about like what phase you need to be in and stuff like that. The point being, though, is that our goals and our targets will be quantified. They'll have some sort of measure that we have to build up to. So goals are organized within programs, and we'll talk about those in a minute. So it goes like this. You have the program, and within that program you have goals, and within those goals you have targets. Again, within the program you're going to have goals, and within those goals there are targets. I do want to talk about a broad category, 2 broad categories within programming. Are skills going to be receptive or expressive? Receptive skills, the person does not have to talk. They typically have to respond, like such as pointing to a card or something like that, but they don't have to talk. An expressive skill, on the other hand, the person verbally has to respond in some way. Please refer to the skill acquisition plan of each program to see if it's a receptive or expressive program. Again, refer to the skill acquisition plan. So here's some programs that you'll typically see in ABA. Behavior programs, manding programs, listener, response, or receptive, tacting or expressive, echoic, imitation, feature function class, interverbal, match a sample, eye contacts, PECs, self-help, social skills, play skills, so forth and so forth. Behavior goals. You may sometimes see behavior shortened as BX. Behavior goals are typically addressed in the behavior plan, although it may involve separate goals. It may involve teaching a new or replacement skill. An example goal within a behavior program would be that Joe would wait appropriately for a peer to respond. That's the overall general goal. The example target within that goal to address that goal would be one, and remember there are several targets per goal. One such example of a target would be that Joe would wait appropriately for 5 seconds, at least 3 times daily. Now, by just mastering that target, he wouldn't have mastered the goal, but when you have several targets, it will all build up to ultimately mastering that one goal. So again, within each goal, there's going to be several targets. MND, short for manding. Manding is most likely or best described as request. Think demand, command, etc. It can be verbal, asking, or nonverbal, pointing. Example goal. Joe will ask for desired items 5 times daily. Within that goal, there may be targets, such as this. Joe will man for novel toy 2 times per day. Again, manding is a verbal or nonverbal request. You could have LR/REC. This is listener responding receptive. Receptive. The person has to respond with an action but doesn't have to talk. Example goal. Joe will point at 25 new items. An example target within that goal would be Joe will point to 5 animals in 4 out of 5 trials. So listener responding task, the person has to respond with some action. So I might say, Joe, point to the kangaroo. And you'd have to point to the kangaroo. Or give you the card. The point being is the listener responds to you. And it's a receptive program in that they have to do the response but don't have to say anything. Likewise, TCT/expressive, this is where we get labeling. A tact is just a label. So if you hear that phrase tact, we're talking about a label. It's expressive. It means the person has to verbalize. Example goal, Joe will label people in the community. A target that addresses that goal, for example, would be Joe will label 3 community members or helpers in 4 out of 5 trials. That is tacting, or which is an expressive program. Again, a tact is a label. EKO, or echoic. This means the person copies what you said. It's expressive. It means the person has to verbalize. The point in the echoic is that the person is copying what you've said. It can be a sound or a word. An example goal might be something like Joe will learn 10 new sounds. And an example target to address that goal would be Joe will repeat the sound blah blah in 4 out of 5 trials. Echoic programs can also help with articulation and the person learning new sounds. IMI, or imitation. Imitation. Will the person copy your motor movements or copy what you're saying? In that way, it can be a receptive, like a motor imitation, or expressive, a verbal imitation. Example goal might be Joe will copy peers 10 times weekly. An example target would be that Joe will imitate a peer's play activity in 4 out of 5 trials. The point being in an imitation is that the person will copy you whatever you're doing, whether it's a physical or a verbal thing. Imitation, or lack of imitation, is one of the deficits in autism. So this is an important program. FFC. This means feature function class, identifying different features, functions, classes of objects. This helps a person build up their repertoire. For example, teaching them what the features of vehicles are, or teaching them what the functions of, say, office equipment is. Even though it kind of seems arbitrary, you want to build that up. You want to build that behavioral repertoire up in individuals. It can be expressive or receptive. An example goal might be Joe can discriminate between categories of objects, whereas the example target would be that Joe will identify vehicles in the presence of 4 animals in 4 out of 5 trials. The point in feature function class, though, is to teach that every single item that you're looking at has some other features that can denote it, whether it's this or that. For example, vehicles, right? Most vehicles have tires, or most vehicles have a door. But so do most houses. So what other features will determine whether that's a house or a vehicle? IV, or interverbal. Interverbal. Can the person recall the word or phrase with only a verbal SD? For example, if I say row, row, row your, and you fill in the word boat, that is an interverbal skill. Or if I say the cow goes moo, that's an interverbal skill. Another type would be if I ask what your phone number is. When you can answer that, that's an interverbal skill. Only the verbal SD. Don't need like a picture or something of your phone or your phone number. You can just answer it. This is an expressive goal. An example goal would be that Joe will learn to respond to social questions. An example target would be that Joe can answer where he lives in 4 out of 5 trials. MTS, or match the sample. You're matching items to items, sometimes 2D to 2D, 3D to 3D, or 2D to 3D. This is mainly a receptive goal. An example goal might be that Joe will match 3D to 2D objects. An example target might be that Joe will match 5 3D objects to their corresponding pictures in a book. Matching is an academic or pre-academic skill, and it's within the cognitive realm. The idea of matching is that you're showing that things can go together, that you can group things. Another day that matching helps is with reading, actually. So if you think about you're reading a book, and it says the dog goes woof. Well, you can show the picture of the dog on the book and match it to the words. This is one of the bases is why we do matching, so that the person can learn to do these skills, that things can go together, that those words in a book mean something else. The point being, though, in matching is the person also has to be paying attention. This helps build up from some attending goals, or from some attending deficits with that individual. Basically, though, matching is one of those programs that you may see a lot of. You may see self-help skills. This works on self-help items to make the person more independent. It can be expressive or receptive. For example, a goal might be that Joe will use the restroom independently, and within that goal, a target would be Joe will flush toilet after going to the restroom in at least 4 out of 5 trials. So again, self-help skills, and these are typically addressed through chaining. Chaining, if you remember, is when you link skills together, are going to be receptive and expressive skills, and mainly deal with items that help that person to be more independent in their day-to-day life. You also have play skills. One of the great things about ABA is that when you're working with the kids, you get to play sometimes. Okay? You get to play a lot of the time, actually. Play skills addresses deficits in play skills. A lot of time in autism, kids will play repetitively with objects, such as spinning their wheels or lining cars or toys up. Play skills will teach the child or patient how to appropriately play. It may also teach them appropriate leisure skills. Sometimes you have to teach a kid how to play or to sit for a while and do something on their own. This is a very important skill to teach. One goal might be that Joe will play with the toys or items appropriately three times a day. Example target within that might be that Joe will play with cars for at least 2 minutes at least 2 times a day. SOC, or social. Social programs address deficits with social skills, which is, of course, a primary deficit within autism. It can be receptive or expressive. Example goals might include something like Joe will ask for help when necessary, while the target within that would be that Joe would ask the RBT for help in locating a missing puzzle piece in 4 out of 5 trials. The point being is that social goals will address these kind of deficits. Most of the time, they have to be run with other people or peers. The analyst will help set that up for you. But if you're in a home and there's siblings available, or if a friend is coming over, or going on a play date or something like that, these are great times to address social goals. You may also be asked to do PEC systems, the Picture Exchange Communication System. This is a form of augmentative communication, where the person has to use cards, like such on the bottom where it says, I want the ball, instead of verbally saying something. Again, the analyst will help you go over this and help you decide if this is an appropriate program. And if the analyst does decide it's an appropriate program, then they will teach you how to do this. The point being, though, is that the person is using pictures to communicate. Others that you might see might include math or reading. The point, though, being is that basically anything can be made into a program and a goal with targets. Remember, we're individualizing this treatment plan to the patient, and it's going to be highly dependent on where they are, what skills they already have, and their age. For example, when I design programs or goals for a 16-year-old, it's much different than for a 5-year-old. And sometimes they're not always going to fit neatly into these categories. So the point being, though, is that within each program, though, there's going to be goals, and within those goals, there's going to be targets. And they will always be individualized to the patient.